All right. Welcome back for day 2 of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show doubleheader here. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live Thursday, October 17th, 2024. As people trickle in after this disappointing Sabres loss in Columbus tonight, on your way in, I'm going to get this out of the way now. If you could please like this video. You don't have to like the Sabres hockey team right now, but please like this video. Subscribe to the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show audio version on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could, please leave a 5-star review and dump all over the team. You can dump all over the hosts. I'm changing that tune. You can do whatever you want in the comment section as long as you leave a 5-star review. And by the way, hit the notification bell if you're watching on YouTube so you know when Matthew and I go live. We're going live pretty frequently this season, and we have a lot to talk about tonight as the Sabres fall to 1-4-1 on the season after allowing 6 goals for a second straight game and a 6-4 loss in Columbus tonight. Jiri Kulich gets his first NHL goal tonight. He was plus 340, Matthew, and I'll get to you in a second. I should probably introduce you now before we get down to the rundown. I am your host, Kris Baker. I'm here with Matthew Fairburn, Sabres beat writer from The Athletic. Matthew, I'm not ready to throw it to you yet. I just want to kind of tee up the game, and then we'll talk about the good stuff, which is really the bad stuff. But I was mentioning Jiri Kulich. He was plus 340 for an anytime goal tonight, executing a great deflection for his first NHL goal. I think we're going to talk a little bit about Kulich because I thought he was really good tonight. Ryan McLeod and JJ Peterka score for the second straight game, and then Owen Power, Michigan man, goes down into Buckeye country and gets a goal to complete the scoring for the Sabres. Devin Levi, 19 saves on 25 shots. Probably want to talk a little bit about Levi too. So I guess just a couple things. First of all, the Blue Jackets just played with a lot of urgency tonight. They won the battles. They were quick on pucks. They had such good sticks tonight. Just more urgency than the Sabres. They were quick to close on them. They took away the Sabres' time and space, and the Sabres, they were just suffocated tonight. Kind of looked like a Blue Jackets team. The Sabres could have done things to help themselves, but the Blue Jackets played a good hockey game tonight. Kind of looked like that attacking style that when Torts was there, kind of reminiscent of that, going way back there, multiple years. But, here we are, Matthew, 6 games in. Sabres just have 3 points. That goal of taking 4 points on this little 3-game swing here is now toast. You have a powerless play that is now 0 for 17. We'll probably talk about that. But, last night, you and I were together after that disappointing loss in Pittsburgh. And we kind of posed the question, in the context of this season, not the past decade plus, this season, we kind of threw it out there like, is this crisis mode? Is it too early? And now I'm going to ask you again after tonight's game to just tee it up and let's just kind of go for it. Where are you at on this team in terms of, is this crisis mode now? Again, 1-4-1.
Yeah, if it's not there, it's very close. This is as close to crisis mode, I think, as you can get on October 17th, frankly. It's not over, right? They're not completely toast. There's time to turn it around. All of those caveats aside, there are some glaring issues with this team. And it seems like those issues change from night to night, right? It's like, tonight goaltending was a problem, for sure. We talked last night about Devin Levi looking sharp to start the season and having a real chance to run with the job. And he comes out and has easily his worst game of the season, and his worst game I can remember him having in quite a while at the NHL level. So, not every goal was his fault, but there were a couple that he could have had. Every time they got within a goal, they fell back. And so that's one issue. But then you have, Alex Tuch, 0 shots on net. Tage Thompson had 2 shots on net, I think, so the top line outside of JJ Peterka, who got another goal and I think had some good moments, the top line wasn't there for you in this game. The defense has been a problem the last couple of games, right? You had Matthias Samuelsson with another ugly pass that led to a goal the other way. He's not playing well to start the season. So you're 1-4-1. Worse record than a season ago. Worse goal differential than through 6 games a season ago. Worse power play than you had through 6 games a season ago. It feels like it's bordering on a crisis for this team, on wondering exactly what is going on. Because you can think back to, I found myself thinking back to 2 years ago at this time. Through 6 games, they were 4-2. They had a +8 goal differential. They had 23 goals. They were this high-flying, exciting team that fearlessly went into Edmonton and Calgary, 2 pretty tough buildings, and won games. Had all this promising young talent on the roster. And tonight I was just wondering, like, where that went. What happened to that? Tage Thompson has 3 goals in 6 games to start the season, but what happened to that Tage Thompson from a couple years ago? Can they get him back? Dylan Cousins, Alex Tuck, Rasmus Dahlin, same thing. I think when a team starts a season this way, when they build it as a must, a win now season, right? And you've already fired the coach that was part of developing this group, and you bring in the win now coach in Lindy Ruff. I think when they start this way, you start to look at it and wonder how the whole thing has been built, right? Because if not now, you have some serious questions to answer about where you go from here. Because Dahlin, Power, Samuelsson, Cousins, Thompson, all already locked up to long-term contracts. They're not all playing up to those contracts. I'm not sure if any of them are. I actually don't think any of them are. I've been pretty complimentary of Owen Power, but I don't think he's been an $8 million defenseman yet. I don't think Matthias Samuelsson has been a $4+ million defenseman. Maybe you could say Tage Thompson has been a $7 million center, maybe. But Dylan
He'd be a good
Cousins,
$7 million winger.
well, I started a chat. We had somebody suggest that, and that's a
Okay,
topic
we'll get to that. We got some
we've
runway
been
here to get
sitting
to
on
that.
that one for a little while, letting that thought percolate a little bit. But none of those guys are living up to the contract. Rasmus Dahlin's not an $11 million player right now. Dylan Cousins is not a $7 million player. And so as you look at this next wave of restricted free agents and wonder about this core that they have they've gone to great lengths to protect this core, right? And to really hoard the young talent, the young prospects, and not want to shake anything up. And now here they are right back where they were when they started last season with what I thought was a manageable schedule. Pittsburgh is not that good of a team. They've obviously got their horses, they're experienced guys, and they know how to get out of a game with a win like they did on Wednesday. Columbus is not going to be a playoff team in all likelihood, and you got soundly outplayed. Okay, it was a back-to-back, but Florida was undermanned and they got that win. LA, one of those fringe Western Conference playoff teams, not a juggernaut by any means. And the Devils, they're a good team, but should you be 1-4-1 at this point? I don't know. It's now you have Chicago on Saturday. And if you want to talk about real crisis mode, if you return home 1-5-1 with a Stanley Cup contender Dallas Stars team visiting your building on a Tuesday night, that is a legitimate crisis. If for no other reason than I don't know how many people are going to show up to that game, and I don't know what type of mood the people that do show up are going to be in.
Well, yeah, it's kind of funny about that, because I woke up this morning after the Pittsburgh game last night, a game that they clearly should have won. They got off to a great start, and it was just classic. I sent you a text this morning. I sent the same text to someone else. We were talking about the team this morning. I just woke up really just kind of annoyed by the team. Not as a fan, just someone who likes watching, I watch this team more than any team, obviously. You work hard during the day, you sit down, you watch a good game. I say it all the time. I just want to watch a good hockey team, a good hockey game regularly. It's an institutional illness that this organization has, especially this team, to just lose games for whatever reason. And like last night, they couldn't execute the basic formula of protecting a lead. And I don't want to hear about, the youngest team in the league, because they're young guys. Yeah, they're the youngest team in the league statistically, but they got a lot of guys that played a lot of games in this league. And even
And
on the
do they
back-to-back,
have? I think they have the oldest coach in the league.
they have the oldest coach in the league. Yeah,
I
well,
think.
we'll talk about
I
him
don't
too.
know. I don't know for sure on that, but I'm pretty sure. I
But
believe he
but
has
you
the
talk about
most wins without a Stanley Cup. He's got like the fifth most wins of all time. He's got to be, if not the oldest coach in the league, one of the most experienced coaches in hockey, which he is supposed to make up for some of that gap.
But I don't
But
even want to hear
and
about
I
that though, about the players and the young team or anything like that. It's just the way that they lose games, the way that they're, last year they weren't ready to play. Same core group comes back. You make some really small modifications to the roster. Well, the fourth line we talked a lot about and they were hyped up a lot. Um, but it's an institutional illness. That's like the words that I'm really stuck on with this group, this team. And it makes it hard. You talk about, our fans going to come to the game. It makes it hard for those that still care to keep watching the team. And that's really bad for business for a team that desperately needs to generate some revenue. So when we talk about the start to the team, to the season that the team's having, we kind of, you mentioned a lot just about tonight. We can go through them one by one, or we could just talk about them as a whole. I think I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit. Tuck, didn't like Tuck's game at all tonight. I thought that he just did some weird things in the first period. You saw it right from the get-go. And a couple leisurely, like the way that Columbus was playing with the urgency, the guys that didn't have the jump, it made them stand out like sore thumbs. And there was just some plays I didn't like from him. People are going to say, because I get it sometimes in the YouTube comments or whatever on Twitter, whatever. Like I have this thing for Tuck. I don't. I just expect you got to hold him up to a high regard here. He's on your top line. He's one of those guys that 2 seasons ago, which seems so far away now. By the way, 2 seasons ago, it's so far in the rearview mirror. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. But he's one of those guys that needed to bounce back. And I know he's getting points. He had an assist last night. The Tuck, a puck bounces off his skate, goes right to Thompson on the first goal. Like I just needed more from him as a leader. Took a horrible penalty, hooking penalty. All the leaders are taking penalties.
Prime chance in front of the net. Had a prime
Missed the
chance
net.
in front of the net and backhanded it like incredibly wide. I don't know how it went that far wide.
So
But yeah,
I don't
bad
want
penalty, not great. He and Thompson, not great on the details of, tracking back into their own zone. And I'm with you. I don't really want to hear about the back-to-back in the 6th game of the season, right? After you had 3 days in between, games heading into this road trip. Going from Pittsburgh to Columbus is not grueling as far as travel goes.
It's
It
a game that
is.
they had to win. It's a game that they had to win.
I think that's what it is. Like you can look at, and I understand. I don't know how many of these people are left, but 1-4-1. If they go on a little bit of a run, it's still only 6 games. It's a small percentage of the season. You don't want to overreact, but it's a matter of what have you seen that gives you the sense that they're capable of going on the run. If you can't go into Columbus and win a game, if you can't finish off that game against Pittsburgh, these things start to become patterns. When it was a week ago and they had a really strong game as far as generating chances and lost to the Kings because Darcy Kemper had a great game, you can say, okay, game 3, it is what it is. get the next one, they get the next one. But when these things start stacking up, this team hasn't given us any evidence that they're capable of digging out of a hole. And so the deeper they dig themselves, the more you wonder what they're in for this year. Are they just going to be chasing it again like they were last year, trying to get back to 500, but struggling to do it, not being able to string wins together? These are all the problems they had last season. They have the same core back, right? They changed the fourth line. They brought in McLeod and Zucker. So they have, a different mix in the bottom six. But as far as the guys that are driving your team are supposed to be driving your team, it's the same group. And so they need to snap out of it, is what it comes down to. They need to just, to your point about the game on Wednesday night, finding a way to lose that game, finding a way to lose this game, frankly, when they were clawing back into it, and then, making defensive mistakes. And then you don't get the timely saves and it stands out. But, it was, I think, a 2-0 game when they got their power play early. They didn't get it the other way. They let up a goal. And so it's not even just about, the 0 for 17. I mean, that's a disgusting stat, but it's what it does to the flow of a game. So they really need to snap out of it. They need to beat Chicago, and then they probably need to steal that, it's hard to say they need to do anything in October, right? It's a long season. There's ebbs and flows, but they need to start believing that they can do it, because there's just too many of these guys. It's such a common problem over the last 13 years, but so many of these guys are now just becoming accustomed to this, finding ways to lose games. And I don't know how you really shift that psyche, that mindset. And I think it's where, like, I don't view this as a Lindy Ruff problem, the way they've started the season. But I think what these first 6 games show is that it's not going to be as easy as replacing the coach, and that'll fix everything. It's going to take some time for his system, for these habits to become truly habits, and for him to change how this team approaches games and the consistency with which they play. It's clearly not going to happen overnight, because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, this conversation can go a million different directions, obviously. I agree with you that it is kind of at the point now, it is crisis mode. We've seen a lot from this group the past couple of years. We saw them. We didn't think that, they could have the start to this season that they had last season. They learned, they got their coach fired. Lindy comes in. They're all rah-rah. Everyone's all hyped up about the fourth line. Lindy's got the guys coming in. They have this great preseason, beating AHL level talent. They're scoring goals. Everyone's back checking. They're playing defense. I'm not seeing that consistently now the past couple of games. And by the way, you mentioned that Kings game when they came back, right? Like that's the only game where maybe they actually had an excuse, because they were coming back from Prague. They had more of an excuse there than they did on the back-to-back. So I think it's just gotten worse. The Lindy thing, I don't know if it's a Lindy problem or not. He seems pretty calm for a team that's having a pretty bad start. Now you can say, well, they're scoring goals. They scored 5 last night. They scored 4 tonight. But the coach, I've said this before, I think that the coach's job really is to stop the other team from scoring, finding ways to stop the other team from scoring goals. He gave up 6 in back-to-back nights here. And goaltending's part of it. We should talk about Levi a little bit. But yeah, they got a lot of work to do. Levi tonight, first 2 beaten from the dot, clean shots. If you see it, you should stop it. That third goal was the rebound where, he wasn't like, he was looking around a screen. He wasn't in goalie mode. I'm talking about, like, you got to be in goalie mode even when you're looking around the screen. When you're not in goalie mode, you can't react properly to the shot, and you can't control the rebound. That's what happened there, but there was no coverage. Guy was untouched. I forget who scored that one. But then the rest, Fantilli, was it? Yeah. So I don't know.
Part of it was where he kicked the rebound too. He almost kicked it away from where the.
Well, it was off his glove, right?
It was
That
like
one was
under
off.
his glove. He sort of fought it, and it looked like it hit his glove, but maybe a little bit of his pad too, and he sort of
Yeah.
dumped it almost away from his coverage with how bad he mishandled it, but just wasn't sharp. And so it's the funny thing about hockey, funny thing about this league is that if they got better play in net tonight or Wednesday night, maybe, the word crisis isn't even in the vocabulary tonight, right? Like maybe they got out of there with 2 wins and, they're back to 500, but the fact of the matter is they didn't get the goaltending. And they didn't do a lot to help themselves either. I mentioned Samuelson's turnover, Thompson and Tuck's lack of back checking, and against Pittsburgh, this was a worse game by Levi than Luukkonen had Wednesday. There was a couple I thought he should have had to like elevate and steal the game for them and shut the door, but their problems there were elsewhere. Their main problems, anyways. But that's just another piece of this, though, because it all ties into how they built this team. You let James go on waivers, and he gets claimed, and so now you don't really have a place to turn. It's like, okay, Levi has. You're not going to pull the plug on Levi after one bad game,
No.
but
No.
and I still feel okay about the tandem in general. I think they'll fight their way through it and find their game. They need more consistent play in front of them. The first 3 or 4 games of the season, I thought they were getting it. The last 2 nights, they've been, looking more like the team from the last couple of years in their own end at times. But, goaltending was a question coming into the season. I don't think anybody would really argue too much with what they did going into the season with these 2 guys. Maybe you'd like to have Reimer on the team instead of Jacob Bryson, who probably could have got through waivers, but splitting hairs a little bit there because I don't think you'd be turning to James Reimer at this point anyways, right?
No.
You're going back to Luukkonen on Saturday and seeing where he's at. And I don't think you'd be sending Levi down to Rochester. So the goalie piece of it, while it could have changed this conversation, the only thing it would have done was, hide some of the other flaws. And, it's the same thing we saw often last year. It's like if they're getting the goals, they're not getting the defense. If they're locking it down defensively, they're not capitalizing on their chances. It's like they can't walk and chew gum at the same time, and it's, they can't play effectively from behind either, it seems like. So, and I don't know. There's a lot to figure out for these guys, and I don't know at what point it becomes urgent for the general manager to make a trade or do something to try to shake the group up, because he was pretty upset about the start last year, and it was a small thing, but they trade for Eric Robinson. They do a little something to try to, mix things up, shake up the group. Benching Jack Quinn tonight was something that we can get to, but you only have so many of those buttons you can press as far as pulling ice time away. And I don't know how often Lindy can do it and have it remain effective. That big word that got thrown around a lot in the summer.
Say it one more time. You can say
It starts in the room, right? It starts with that's what we said from the moment those guys started talking about it. I believe the quote Don Granato had when he and I spoke shortly after he was fired is like, do you want to be punished or are you an accountable person? And I don't know, that maybe they want to be punished. Maybe Lindy needs to punish more of these guys. And I don't know what that looks like, but Saturday against Chicago should be a chance to snap out of this with a day off in between games and an opponent that should be beatable. That ought to be a chance to snap out of it. But we'll see if they can do it.
Yeah, the question about when, or when's the right time for Kevin Adams to think about shaking things up. I mean, he should have a little bit of confidence to make a deal after picking up McLeod, right? Don't you think? Like, he picked up a good player there. You could probably get more use out of McLeod moving forward than what he's doing right now if you have to. I
He's
don't know
been
if
good.
he's been good.
He's finishing chances the last couple of games, goals in 2 straight. He's the fastest player on the team, and it's showing up in a lot of meaningful ways. I don't know what the upside is from a finishing standpoint. Like, is he going to be a major point producer? I don't know. I don't think doesn't strike me that that's in his skill set, but I don't know. It could be in the right situation. It could certainly jumpstart a different line. That line has been pretty consistent and pretty solid, but maybe if you split them up, those are guys that can get other lines going and, make the whole lineup a little bit more consistent instead of just that line. Seems like it's been going most nights. I mean, I think McLeod has been a bright spot, and that does look like a pretty good trade right now. And it's what you don't know how many trades are sitting out there for the type of player that the Sabres are really missing, like another real top 6 forward that can, strike some fear into the other team. But you do wonder at what point it becomes, like I said, urgent for the general manager. Like, is this truly a make or break season for him? And what will that look like? I don't know, because
In most organizations, it is.
it absolutely would be in most organizations. And I've seen some of these vague, references to it. I think Elliot Friedman mentioned all the pressure before the season. And I've seen some other national outlets like throw out general ideas that it's a pressure season for Kevin Adams. But I think that is more based on what you're talking about, that in most organizations, that's what it would be. Your 5th season, you haven't made the playoffs. This is what you're building towards. You've already fired 2 coaches, right? So it would be, in a lot of cases, very much make or break.
Yeah.
But I don't know that any of that reporting is based in, conversations with ownership here. And that's really the reality.
No, they're reporting, I think, what I just said, like, yeah, in most
Exactly.
organizations, so
In
it should
most
be. And I'm not taking what you're saying, by the way, as your thoughts on it. I think
No,
what you're saying is, no, there's a plan. Like, he's like safe and maybe comfortable and just sticking to the plan, even if it's not working
I
at the
think we'll
present
see.
moment.
I think his actions will tell us maybe that story. And that's something that will evolve over the course of the season, depending on how things go from here. I don't want to get too far ahead, right? And be sitting here 6 games into the season wondering about the GM, but it's something to monitor because I think how he acts will tell a little bit of that story. But I just don't, my point being that this idea that he's under pressure, I don't think is rooted in any sort of concrete. I don't think Terry Pagula has shared that with anybody.
There's no primary source saying
exactly. And Terry Pagula is the one who could put him under pressure. Nobody else. I mean, theoretically, I guess Lindy Ruff could, depending on who's, got the power within the organization. But it's not. That's not really the situation that they're in right now. They're not. But you get a couple months in and you're, chasing points and you're outside the playoff picture. I just wonder what we'll see from him in terms of action, in terms of trying to shake things up if it gets to that point. But maybe this is all premature. Maybe they win a couple games in a row. They get back, keep their head above water. But they are right now, treading water, like trying to. The boat is taking on water a little bit, and they need to figure it out quickly. Otherwise, it does get to that point where those conversations become a little bit louder.
So Jack Quinn out of the lineup tonight. Do you think after the result tonight that he gets back in against Chicago? You sit him down for just 1? You sit him down for 2? I mean, Kulich had a great game, because it all ties in, I think, with kind of who replaced him. Kulik, and this is part of the bigger problem, right? Kulik, I think, led the team with 8 shot attempts tonight. He led the team with 5 shots on goal, scored a goal. He was your leader in these big categories that you need. And the other guys, I know Kulik didn't play. Maybe he was fresher, right? But we talked about it last night, like the good pressure that he brings to the situation. Cousins finally got a point tonight. He was a plus player, one of few plus players tonight. But I think like everything's on the table if you think that you want to shake things up and move things around. You know, Peterka had a good game again tonight. Tage wasn't, Tage didn't get 2 shots until the end of the game, but I'm not going to really pin this on him. He needs to be better. I don't know if he's like the biggest reason they lost. But I'm at a loss here for kind of figuring out, what does Lindy do besides just sitting Jack Quinn, and what do you do with Quinn coming off a 6-4 loss in Columbus?
I was thinking about this, and I would strongly consider keeping Quinn on the bench for another game. I think the message might get through a little bit more if it's 2 games. This is the first time that there has been a legitimate, ice time move by Lindy Ruff to send a message, right? I would say, where he's benched a guy, pulled him from the lineup, and, punished a guy, accountability, the whole thing. And if guys feel like it's like, oh, this will be my turn for the 1 game off or the 1 game off, part of me thinks you benched him. The guy you put in was probably your best player. Why would you put him back in? Make it a competition.
Unless you have someone else that you have to take out.
Unless you have somebody else that you feel like needs a message. Now, you could take Benson out if you feel like he's still not 100%. I don't think his play. I don't have a problem with the way Zach Benson is playing. He's not producing, though, right? He's not putting up points. But I don't have a problem overall with his game. I like him a lot as a player. Is he miscast, perhaps, at the moment as a top 6 guy? Maybe. I don't know. Like,
yeah, that goes right back to your point about how the team was built.
Right. I think it's quite possible. Maybe something you could do is bump McLeod up to that line on the wing and bump Benson down. I think he'd be but then you don't have a center on that line. You'd have to.
It's the same reason why I hesitate to move Cousins to a wing, and
you'd almost have to
bring
put
McLeod
Krebs
up.
Yeah, you'd have to put Krebs at center on the 3rd line and figure out what to do with Benson from there. So it gets a little bit tricky. You could take him out and put Quinn back in, but I don't know that Benson's play has warranted a benching. I mean, I don't know if you're going by
his play hasn't warranted it. By the way, Benson's play has not warranted sitting. It's a health related thing if he's not 100%.
But if it's health related,
you could. Last night,
I think you could easily justify that and say we just need to give this kid a few days to let this thing heal up, so that we can get the best version of him. But I think it would be some merit to letting Quinn sit 1 more. He didn't play well for the first 5 games at all, and Kulik has outplayed him. So you want to create competition. The only way to do it is to have a guy like Kulik who's legitimately threatening somebody's job. And I think he is now threatening jobs in the top 6. He's threatening Jack Quinn's job right now. But if he continues to play like he did on Thursday night and continues to take steps forward, I mean, he'll be threatening Alex Tuch's job on the top line before too long if he plays like that. I may be getting ahead of myself again, but he's playing well. He looks comfortable, and he's a high upside scorer. We know that. And if he gets hot, they could use him on the power play, that's for sure. And, you want him threatening jobs and getting some of these guys to play a little bit better. So I think I probably would keep Quinn out.
Benson, 20 shifts tonight, a little over 14 and a half minutes. Minutes were up over the past 2 games. Haven't looked too deep into the other numbers with it. But it's kind of interesting. I like where you're at with Quinn, though, sitting more than 1. I want to say they did the same thing with Paterka a couple seasons ago when they sat him down for a little bit. I think that was a 2-game sit, had him watch from up top, came back
I think Quinn did the
a,
same
a
a
fractionally
couple
better
years ago
player.
too.
Yeah.
And I think he, spent. This is a guy, and this is part of the atmosphere, right? That has been created and almost out of necessity had to be created by Don Granato, where everybody needed their confidence, needed their the belief that they could play at this level, and it was all part of developing these guys and bringing them along. But as a result, you have a big chunk of this team that's already been paid, that are pretty financially comfortable. And then you have other guys like Jack Quinn and JJ Paterka, and Paterka has gone out and earned it the way he played last year and the way he started this season. But you have guys that have essentially been handed opportunity and spots because they haven't brought in anybody to push them. Paterka was really challenged before last season at the exit interviews the season before. It was a guy that they really pushed and challenged, Granato and his coaching staff, talking about the things he needed to do to keep his spot, whether it was power play and, the minutes that he thought he deserved. And he went out and he had a good season. I think Jack Quinn maybe needs a similar cage rattling moment here to say, like, this isn't yours, right? The next 7x7 contract is not going to be handed to you. Your power play time and your top 6 ice time will not be. You don't get to go through 10 games of the season without a goal and turning the puck over and not contributing in other ways. So let him watch Kulik play well again. Let him wonder whether Kulik has, passed him. That's the environment I think would be a lot healthier and more conducive to winning hockey than the alternative, where he just goes back in. You can't take Kulik out. I think that's a non-starter, the way he played. But I suppose you could put Quinn back in. I just struggle to find out exactly where to do it.
We went for an hour last night. We can go as long as we want tonight. I don't want to talk about the same things 2 nights in a row. I said we're going to keep talking about the power play though until they score, because I do want to get to the chat. This is definitely a show for the chat tonight. The audience is a big part of the show every week. I think tonight would definitely be very prudent to pay attention to the chat, give them a voice in the show. But just real quick on the power play, I don't know what else to do. Zucker was better. Hey, by the way, Zucker had a good game tonight also. Nice backhand pass. I thought he had a couple nice plays. Not a perfect game on the ice for a couple. But, there too. The one thing I would say about the power play is that it just feels like it's crazy that they haven't scored to start the year. They're 0 for 17. And these are not numbers, but I did just for funsies look up power play drought statistics. And I didn't even realize Pittsburgh last year, it was like mid-December, they snapped an 0 for 37 power play drought. So the Sabres have some work to do before they get to that level. Florida had a power play drought of 43 in 2014. Now 2014, you're like, okay, yeah, you're going back a while. San Jose had 141 straight in 1997. Apparently the Maple Leafs at some point in their career, which is great. Toronto, they went 51 power plays without scoring. But yeah, so 17 isn't awful in terms of historic terms, but man, it feels like it's bad though. So I don't even like, when are they going to score? I tried to will it. I tried to will a power play goal into existence tonight by putting up a poll on our YouTube page today. Say, hey, look, they haven't scored on the power play, but tonight's the night and they're going to score 2. And I don't like being made to look bad. And I look bad. Yeah, Bakes, where were your 2 power play goals? Thanks, Grumpy Scott. I tried to will it into existence. But from now on, I'll just stick to talking about Pro Corporal Topoff, who had a nice goal today. Nice goal. Got a little middle of the ice, but whatever. No one wants to hear about that. I got yelled at today. Some guy yelled at me on, he said, enough about the prospects. I'm like, dude, this is a prospects account. I'm like, it's like yelling. What I text you, I said, it's like yelling at Colonel Sanders. Enough about the chicken.
Right.
But do you have anything on the power play? Like, even if we spend 30 seconds on it, because I said we're going to keep talking about it until they score, and they didn't score.
It's not. It's the same thing we talked about last night, right? Like the big picture of it is the same thing, right? You didn't bring in anything from the outside, so you got to get into your bunker and figure it out with the guys you got with you. This is the group you brought to the dance. These are the coaches and the players that you brought. You didn't really do anything. It was a lot of they'll bounce back, or the one guy I think that can help it is Kulik, and that's something that maybe with they're not practicing tomorrow. I don't just got notified, no practice tomorrow. They had originally scheduled it in Chicago, but with a back-to-back, I think that makes sense. So you're not going to get a lot of on ice. You're not going to get any on ice time to fix it. But I think Kulik, I still like the idea of having Kulik and Thompson on the ice at the same time. But I too was a goalie, so I don't know if I'm the one that should be drawing it up. But 0 for 17, it's costing them games. Same thing as last season. You'd be like, well, if the power play was average, well, guess what? It's not, and it's still not, and certainly a cause for concern. But yeah, something that's tough to overanalyze at this point because it looked a little bit better. They got set up at least tonight, but still too much perimeter and not enough net front, which the whole point of the offseason was that, or the message from Lindy Ruff was that work ethic was going to come before skill on the power play, and we have not seen that at all.
Well, I just discovered a catastrophe, so I had a bunch of things starred, and they're now gone from my chat when I restarted. I had to restart the laptop right before we went live, so I lost all of those that I had starred. So I guess we'll start from scratch. If you have anything queued up, let's go into the chat and get that.
I've got a lot of stars.
Okay, I don't see any, so you roll with it. Let's go.
Friend of the show here, Michael, says, I choose to see the positives. I always sleep better the times I put the pillow over my face and scream until I pass out.
I think there's a lot of that. Yeah. When I was trying to fix the chat, I was going through, I'm seeing a lot of that. Yeah, like I'm usually like pretty reserved when they go through rough stretches and kind of not making excuses necessarily, but like, you can kind of rationalize some of the things that happen. I'm done with that. I'm done with that.
Yeah. Brian Cummings, I think, with sort of the encapsulating this team, everyone taking a turn as the boat anchor. Last night, it was the second line in goaltending. Tonight, the top line in goaltending. Tuck, no shots. Thompson, no shots until the 6-on-5 at the end. And that is it, right? It's like whack-a-mole with their issues. They get one figured out for a night and another one pops up. And they're just not all going at the same time. And you're not going to have that all the time, but just doesn't feel like there's any, like a couple of years ago, you could just count on that top line to really bring it most nights. And you had a second line that was really cooking for a good stretch of time. And now it just feels like, who knows which or if any of those lines will show up offensively in a meaningful way. That's not a good place to be in this league where you need, your top end players to be your top end players. And I think I had another one starred from Steven Cantor. He said, here's my 2 cents or 3. The Sabres need more veterans. They're the youngest in the league. Tage is not a center. Sabres need a number 1 center. He says he's willing to give up Cousins and Power to get that number 1.
I mean, it's going to take something pretty crazy to get a bona fide number 1. I don't know how many truly there are in the league these days, but I've thought a lot about it. You don't have the bodies in the system right now to move Tage out to the wing. Granato made him a center, and rightfully so. You got the results. That was 2 years ago. You got the results at that time, especially Tage was the guy that you wanted to have the puck on a stick the most. But the more I see it, and look, his effort has been good. I think Tage's effort's been good.
I agree. Other than that,
even in the defensive zone, Yeah, but I mean, he's been pretty good though, effort wise, and I just don't know what you do there. But I do long term in the bigger picture. I mean, if you can get a number one center, of course, every team in the league would say that. You know what I mean? With the exception of what Edmonton, Colorado, Carolina, and Florida. I mean, I'm missing a couple, obviously, but no, yeah, they need a number one center. They do.
I think that might be the biggest flaw on the team is that you thought you had that and you don't. And, you know, it's a much better team if you have it and you can push guys down the lineup. You could push Tage out to wing. You could push Cousins down a line. You could push Tage down a line. You could do a lot of different things. And it's probably, to your point, the hardest piece to acquire.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can go out and just get unless
I mean, there's
you have
more
it.
than the teams that I named, obviously, you know what I mean? But I think the point you just made the point though. Yeah, it is very difficult, I think, to go out and get one.
You got to usually draft and develop those guys. They do come available once in a while. There was one traded a couple years ago. Vegas got him. He's off to a pretty good start to the year.
Yeah, he's having a good start. Yeah. I was
Yeah.
gonna say you have to tank to get one usually.
Right. I mean, and that's, we'll have a lot of time and a lot of live streams this season to discuss, if things start going sideways, where things went wrong. But I have had the thought many times over the last 12 months how much better this roster would look with Jack Eichel on it at the top of the depth chart. And it kind of points to Steven's, point here that they need a number one center. Like they had him. And for a variety of reasons, I was, before I was on the beat, but, obviously for a variety of reasons, that whole thing didn't work out. But it's sort of it is going to become a relevant conversation when discussing Kevin Adams' tenure, right? Because it was
100%.
it was a tenure defining trade, and not just trade, but situation leading up to the trade.
Flashpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very much a line in the sand moment of like, organizationally, and you wonder what impact that had. We hear a lot about people that want to say nobody wants to come to Buffalo, free agents won't sign here, no movement clauses, X, Y, and Z, using these excuses. But how much of that is their own creation, not just by losing, but by situations like that one? But then you also have the trade itself, where you now have Alex Tuck, as the main piece of the trade. Peyton Krebs trying to find his way in the lineup. Noah Ostlund looked pretty good in the preseason, but a lot of runway still left on that trade. But the other guy's got a cup and is, still the guy he was when they traded him. So point being, it's hard to acquire those guys. Yeah. And maybe somebody out there will get in a bad place with their star player and you can try to swing for the fences. But those situations don't pop up a lot.
But in summary, Stephen Cantor, thanks for the comment. Conceptually, totally
I think
agree.
it's a great
need. And I still will collect on that tequila that you owes me from last season. Cantor.
We'll see if he was one of the ones that voted against you on the power play.
That's right. We didn't bet the chat. We will use that. We will use that community tab though to bet the chat. I'm going to throw up one from Soupy because I love Jim Soupy Campbell, but I vehemently disagree with what he has here on the screen. He says, sit Benson. He does nothing but skate around. If you're sitting Benson, I'll say it one more time. I think it would be health related. Benson is consistently making things happen in the offensive zone, even if he's not producing numbers. There were a couple shifts tonight where little plays on the boards with his stick and his feet. He was one of the guys that was actually won a couple battles tonight. And you can say that almost every game. So I disagree that he does nothing but skate around. So Soupy, I love you, but we're on opposite sides of the Benson opinion. I don't know, Matt, if you have anything on that.
Yeah, like I said, I'm fine with the way Benson's playing. I like his game a lot. He hasn't yet. It hasn't all clicked for him in terms of putting up points and scoring goals. But it hasn't clicked for anybody on on that line.
So, and that, the chat's talking to each other, and that's fine. They can talk to each other in the chat, but sometimes I want to pull out their conversation, put up on the screen, because Mike Pokla says, Soupy, I think you're talking about Krebs. And I don't know if he's talking about, because Soupy's kind of on a roll here at this point in the chat, talk about Benson. On Krebs, I want to say this. I'm not pulling out bright spots. He wasn't like this shining star by any means, but I liked his game tonight in terms of physical engagement right from the very first shift. He was physical. He's still, not a world beater by any means, but he was at least engaged. I mean, you got to remember in this game, you saw late in the game when the Sabres should be playing pissed off, they weren't. I can't remember who it was. Corrali maybe, like bumped into Tage and then tried to almost get him to go. No one responded.
He ended up trying to get Clifton to go, if we're thinking of the same play.
On the same shift, I think.
Yeah, like Clifton kind of gave him a nudge after he bumped Tage, and I think he was ready to go, but Clifton didn't want to go there. So Cousins sort of towed the line, almost gave you your wish of getting into a fight to snap him out of his funk, but he didn't.
He should have gone.
He didn't go all the way there. But yeah, there was. I don't know what they finished with hits tonight, but it didn't feel like
9-6. I think it was 9-6.
Yeah, so much of that, like that's not 9-6. I mean, they were averaging as of a couple games ago, they were averaging like 27.5 a game. So they definitely weren't physically engaged on the same level that they were, to start the season. So that's something to monitor. And Krebs has some runway here because Nicolas Aube-Kubel is out for another few weeks at least. So this is his opportunity. When we talk about mixing up the lines and who do you take out and who do you put in, you kind of have to keep Krebs in, I think, to keep some semblance of a fourth line together. And that means Krebs gets an opportunity. I think he's doing fine with it so far. He's, to your point, not really a world beater and not, lighting up the stat sheet, but I don't have a major problem with how he's playing.
It's kind of interesting. So you see Kulik come in to the Quinn spot, and Krebs' first shift, he was noticeable right away. And I started to wonder if maybe Krebs had developed a little bit of a chip on his shoulder with Kulik being the one that gets that opportunity and not him. Because I think Krebs has a chip on his shoulder just in general coming into this season. We talked about it when they started making that series of acquisitions in July, late June, early July, and like Krebs is on watch, and he started basically being rotated in on the first day of training camp, and he's still kind of working his way up. Took an injury to get him some solid playing time, and I think he's doing okay with it, to your point. I don't want to stay on Benson real quick, but I know Cummings was saying, and I think this is kind of a general vibe in the chat tonight about Benson. I'll use Cummings' comment as an example of this thought. Benson would be an asset on the third line. He's a lower middle six at this point with room to grow. Doesn't put up the counting stats of top six. I agree. My commentary more was when Soupy was saying to sit him. I just don't think I'm there yet, unless it's, like I said, health. Sorry, buddy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it bleeds into this point that Jim Shorts brings up here, that the GM has failed to roster a winning team, overestimated what he had, plain and simple. And I think that will be the conversation if they continue along this path, is multiple instances of overestimating what they had. You could go to the extreme of Steven Cantor and say that, they overestimated that they had a number 1 and 2 center when maybe they didn't. And you could apply it to Benson and say that they thought they had a top 6 winger and a 19-year-old who maybe was better suited to play on the third line, or that they thought they had a 30-plus goal scorer in Jack Quinn when, now he's a healthy scratch 5 games into the season. You could go down the list. Thought you had a $4 million defenseman in Matthias Samuelsson and haven't been able to unlock that this season. That will be an absolute topic of conversation, because that is what they did, right? They bet on what they had within. Really, for a second straight year. They did make a big changes to your bottom 6, but what I think we're seeing, they've had an injury to Aube-Kubel, but you're getting good play from that third line. And I don't think anybody would sit here and take issue with Beck Malenstein's game at this point.
No, he's
But,
doing what he came here to do. Yeah.
in certain game scripts, game flow, he just doesn't get the ice time because, you're chasing a game. You're not going to put him on the ice. Lafferty, I don't think has been great, but it's also hard to judge those guys when they were brought in as a unit and right away got broken up because of an injury. More so to the point that this may be an early sign that all of those moves, there's a ceiling to the impact a bunch of, reshuffling on the bottom six can have if you do not have the horses in your top six, the guys who can, to Cummings' point, put up the counting stats, like score the goals. But it's a funny conversation to have right now when they scored 9 goals in the last 2 games, right? It wasn't exactly their problem the last couple of nights, but it's like I said, you got to walk and chew gum at the same time, right? You got to be able to limit chances and score at the other end on the same night. You can't only score on the nights that you're also letting up chances at the other end.
I was going to say we are talking a lot about the forwards, but I think there's merit to that for sure. Even they scored some goals the past couple of games, but they're not scoring on the power play. We've talked about that a lot. Are we letting? And I'm just going to ask the question because I'm kind of curious where you're at. I mean, are we letting Dahlin off the hook a little bit here?
Yeah, but we mentioned him last night. He's again not been an $11 million player.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Simplest way to put it. I'd have to look exactly where he finished tonight in terms of
Just under 27 minutes. He played 30 shifts. I just have his basic numbers up. I don't have any, Corsi expected goals.
66% expected goal share, 68% Corsi share, but he was on the ice.
Yeah.
On the ice for 2 goals against. The Sabres had a 6-3 advantage in scoring chances when he was on the ice at 5-on-5.
They allowed an odd man
But
rush in the power play tonight with a play that he made.
Yep.
Like he got deep. I'm talking about he left his blue
He-
line post.
he's
Went deep, the play
playing-
got behind him.
There was a few instances with him where I thought he's just playing too much one-on-one. Like he's trying to and not really seeing the whole picture of what needs to happen when he has the puck in the offensive zone, which is weird because he's, usually the guy that can really create, and do some things. But Owen Power has been the better offensive player of the two of them. They were on the ice at the same time for a little bit tonight, and I thought that was maybe
Third period,
something
end of the second. Yeah.
something worth looking at. But then you end up with Byram and Yoki Haru. I don't know how appealing that is as a tandem. So maybe that it's time to shuffle those things up. Maybe we've had a few people in the chat suggest it's time for Matthias Samuelsson to take a seat. He had the bad penalty, against LA and didn't get benched, didn't get scratched, got some of his ice time taken away to Dennis Gilbert. But you got a guy in Gilbert who I think he's a solid third pair defenseman. And he's going to bring some physicality. And if you want to talk about a guy that will probably drop the gloves and stick up for a teammate, like that is the guy on the team. So if you're going to you have the means to bench Samuelsson. I think Gilbert is worthy of that ice. I just I don't know if they'll go there yet.
I was hoping they would have played a little pissed off in the second half of that third period. I know they were going for goals, trying to get back in the game, and you can do both. I keep waiting for that. I brought it up last night with Cousins, and I was looking for it tonight. That's why I said Cousins should have dropped him just quickly when he was having that little tete-a-tete there, and they just. But he also, I think he got hit in the face or something. I don't know what his deal was. He was kind of touching his beak, I think, when he skated away from that. There might be some merit to this. Ted Liaros writes, I think going to Prague to start the season really set back the Sabres. It hurt Lindy's training camp. Yeah. I think there's something there just from the level of competition that main group faced with the way camp was constructed. I don't think the travel helped them to and from. I think I don't disagree with that thought, but at the same time, they're back now. They've been back for a couple weeks, and I don't want to hear it as an excuse. But I think like Ted's right on though in terms of camp and just those other elements.
Well, and Woodstock Nunn, mentioned when does the rough factor kick in, and it speaks to my point earlier where I do not think this is a Lindy Ruff problem, but I think what we're seeing is that we had this conversation a lot over the summer that the players couldn't think that they would just swap out the coach and the coach was going to fix everything. Like it's going to take some time for what Lindy Ruff preaches to become habit for these players. It's not going to happen overnight. And the consistency and getting these guys to do it night after night, it's going to take scratching a guy like Quinn, pulling some ice time from different guys. And, we'll see what impact that has, but it's maybe the training camp had something to do with it. I don't know. I mean, I think they got plenty of time together over there in Europe. Seemed like a net positive in some ways to get your NHL group together really quickly and basically from the start of camp. I really didn't think it was too big a detriment other than, playing 2 games against the Devils in less than 48 hours and then, having to come back and getting yourself in an 0-3 hole really quick. But like you said, I don't know where the Devils at right now in the standings because they went over to Prague too and they won a couple games over there. So, they won tonight against the Senators. I know they lost to the Leafs a couple nights ago, but theoretically, all the same excuses would apply to them. New coach, trip to Prague. They are 5-2, leading their division. So they've played more games even than the Sabres have. So I'm not there on that excuse. And I would say the Devils were a bit more decisive in filling their holes on the roster in free agency too. A bit more aggressive and a bit more decisive. And they have a superstar. They have a number one. I think you muted yourself there.
I did. My cough button was on. I was going to say the number one center was the big differentiator between those two clubs, and you got there. You hit the nail on the head. Hey, we're over an hour in. If you could please again hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. It helps the show. Matthew will get a kiss on the cheek from his wife if we get 100 likes tonight. So please do that. I'm good to go a little longer if there's more in the chat. On the show sheet we pretty much covered everything that I had.
Stephen Cantor says should have gotten Trouba. I think that's the kind of guy that they were missing, honestly. I don't know if Trouba would have approved of a Buffalo trade.
Still could.
Some complicating factors.
There are some factors there, right?
I can't imagine. Yeah, his wife's a doctor, but it's New York State.
New York State license is where it works for her, I believe. Yeah.
I would think so. He would still have to live. I think she's finishing her residency, if I'm not mistaken. I think he would have to live away from his wife and his young child. So, and he may sit there and say, I'm going to play for the Rangers and not the Sabres. Like, I'm not letting you guys trade me. Like, I'm going to take a run at a Stanley Cup with a team that has a shot. And, their last core, their last run maybe as a core. But he was a guy that when, it looked like he might be available, would balance things out with lefty righty. It would be just that, that ass kicker back there that
I'm into it.
They have so many offensively minded defensemen that it becomes kind of hard to put the puzzle together sometimes. And Samuelson is supposed to be, that rugged defensive defenseman, and you're not getting it from him. and he's lefty anyway, so it kind of, right now he's just a third pair guy who's not playing well. They need a top 4 righty to play. They needed an upgrade on Yoki Haru with all apologies to Brian Cummings, who I believe is the president of the
Is
Henry
he the
Yoki
Prez? Yeah.
Haru fan club. I think Henry Yoki Haru is a pretty good player. I would not want him. I'd rather him not be on the top pair, but they could have somebody just a little bit heavier, on the right side would have done them would have done them well.
Yeah, I agree. We were talking about the forwards in the back of my mind. I'm sitting here saying that's kind of how my entry point was, just like start talking about Darlene a little bit, get to the D. We're talking about the forwards. We know about the top 6 and they didn't go shopping there and didn't address it. And that's how you have Benson playing up in the lineup right now and all these things. We spent a lot of time talking about the forwards, but I think the deconstruction as we get into the season, especially if they keep having problems getting out of the zone and making some mistakes, lacking consistency, maybe lacking some of the bigger play, heavier play in their own zone, swallowing up smaller forwards, things like that. We're going to have this conversation a little bit more. And I don't know if it's necessarily Bowen Byram, but I threw it up on the screen. Is this as a way to say, hey, we do have to start thinking about the defense a little bit more too. We talked about it in free agency. We threw out guys like DeMello was a guy that was like, bring him in. He's a veteran, maybe not that big, heavy guy, but very solid, block shots, really good defensively, a guy that you can reliably pair with one of your mobile, offensive-minded D. Grumpy Scott, 17, or it's Grumpy Scott 17, says Byram is redundant. I like him, but we didn't need another offensive lefty. I just want to throw that chat up there because I think that there's going to be a lot of people that I think might get there throughout the season. I think everyone likes Byram's athleticism, his offensive motion that he adds in the zone. But it's going to be curious to see if the D continues to still struggle and not pack it in around the goaltender and they're allowing a lot of goals. What gives when Kevin Adams is looking at the roster, when he's ready to pull the trigger on a deal, and who it is that he elects to move out?
Well, the thing with Byram that was true when they made the trade and is true now is that next contract he gets is going to be interesting because Lindy has made a point a couple of times to say he doesn't like having lefty-lefty.
Yep.
He likes to have lefty-righty. And you are in a situation right now where, particularly if you lock up Bo Byram, you are going to have lefty-lefty in your top 4 forever. Unless one of Darlene, Power, or Byram is on your third pair, which I guess maybe Byram could be in a certain scenario, but you're going to have lefty-lefty. And you're going to have not just lefty-lefty, but it's one thing when it's lefty-lefty and it's Samuelson and Darlene like a couple years ago, and they complement each other pretty well and, different styles of play. You're going to have lefty-lefty and like a Byram Power where they're both somewhat similar, mobile, puck-carrying, puck-moving defensemen, offensively minded, not super, neither one is super strong in front of their own net at this point in their development. They're just this similar types of guys. So what do you do, right? I don't know. You got to figure out that contract, and you got to think that's going to come into play with Byram when he says, I think I can be. He's got to be sitting there thinking he could run a power play, right? Or
Yeah.
get some of these heavier minutes, but he's always going to be blocked by Darlene and Power, and because of the contracts, you haven't even really set him up in a chance where he can, realistically pass those guys under any scenario without injury. So I like the player, I like the person in the room. I like the I really think he's, just a guy you want to have in the room, a guy that's been there, done that already at his age, knows what it looks like. There's a lot of reasons to like him, but it's the rest of it and how it's all built that they're lacking something there. They've been talking about having a partner for Owen Power since Owen Power was at Michigan. He wasn't even here yet, and they were talking about finding a righty to play with him. It's not easy to find these guys either. So it's we talked a lot in the summer about how's that puzzle piece going to come together. How's the whole defense gonna fit together, and it's it has fit together, and not really. They haven't moved things around a lot, but they've certainly not gotten the results they wanted either, at least in the last few games.
It's going to get to the point. We talked about this last year when we talked about, the Middlestat situation when he was still on the roster and, what to do, the decisions that Kevin Adams is going to have to make moving forward on this team. If he really truly is going to make some moves to make them a better team, that's where the tough decisions start happening. You mentioned being liked in the room, but, guys that he has relationships with, guys that he drafted and brought in to the system. We're at that point now where, he's there. There's only a couple players on this roster that Kevin Adams did not hand select or re-sign. And I bring that up just because of, I look at Yoki Haru. That's not a Kevin Adams acquisition. Might be it, actually. As I look at it pretty quickly.
The only other ones that weren't Kevin Adams acquisitions, he extended, right? Luukkonen.
Yeah, Luukkonen.
Cousins. Thompson.
Yep. So I guess what I'm saying is, he's going to have some tough decisions. He's going to be trading human beings that he likes, guys that he may have brought in, and just is going to have to say, it's not going to work here for what I want this team to be. But I don't know. We can go on all day. We have a lot. We're going to be talking about a lot of these things again all year. But I want to stay ahead of it. And I think the Byram one was kind of interesting. So I'm glad we talked about that now. And look, I don't think it's overreacting. I really don't. 6 games into the season. Here's the good news. I think you're only 1 point out of wild card. Okay.
It's not bad.
But I, the way that they've gotten to be 1 point out is not cool. And that's why it's just that's why I say institutional illness. I'm going to keep saying that until they go on a 6 or 7 game winning streak, and everything that they're going through right now, the start is in the rearview mirror, but these points matter. So
they're 1 point out of the wild card, but I will also say they are
they played 6 games, right?
They played 6 games, and everybody else has not.
Yes.
So, already chasing it, and they have the worst goal differential in the Eastern Conference.
-7. Yes, that's right. Well,
I guess the one upshot is that the Red Wings are -6. So
great.
The Red Wings, who were, the question was always which rebuild will get there first. Maybe the answer was neither all along.
Maybe. I think we're pretty good here. Well, so what did we learn? Matthew, tonight? We learned that the Yuri Kulik is, I think, here for a little bit. We learned that. Devin Levi is not all the way there to ripping starts away from UPL. I do expect to see UPL on Saturday. It sounds like you agree. I think you even confirmed that already. We learned that there's a lot of work to do with this team in terms of scoring a power play goal, 0 for 17. There's a lot of other things that we learned. I don't want to rehash it because it would just be obnoxious at this point at 11:30 Eastern time here on a Thursday evening. Any final words?
We learned that the chat.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
We learned that the chat does not quit, that the chat is dragging one another into the fight each and every night, even when the team is not dragging themselves into the fight. And so kudos to the chat. It was maybe our liveliest chat since, I don't even know. This was a good one.
And listen, and that's no bullshit, man. They're a big part of the show.
They're the whole part in some ways.
Are.
I mean, the fact that we talk about it all the time, that if, it's amazing the engagement and the conversations people want to have with how bad this team has been for so long. And it does feel like it, with as much as going wrong with them right now, that there's enough of a collection of talent that they're on the cusp of something with some of the right moves. And I think that's why that passion hasn't gone away for a lot of people, because it feels like they shouldn't be very far off. But I also just think the passion in this market is there. The team has killed off a lot of it, but there's a lot of it still there, and I think our crew in the chat is evidence of it.
Yeah, no, it means a lot. They show up every show, so that's good. It's good. Well said. Well said. I'm gonna take us out because I've got to the bottom of my water bottle, and when you drink this much water, what the next step is, right? So I think it's time for me to go take care of some business. Matthew, quick plug for The Athletic. I've been really bad at that the last 2 shows. You got a quick plug where they can find you? Tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at theathletic.com/sabres as always. Maybe we'll throw the link in the description of the video, and then we won't even have to worry about a plug. It'll just be there
I'll do
for
that.
people. I'm writing quite a bit. I have one final story from the Czech Republic that I've been working on the last few days that we're working on finding a run date for it. Not Sabres related, but a fun hockey story, which I feel like maybe the chat needs. Just a fun, not Sabres related hockey story, because I know there are hockey people out there. But
I wanted
yeah,
to make
so
sure we got your plug in tonight because we did go to Twitter tonight, by the way. I figured that out. This did go to Twitter. Could be some people seeing the show for the first time. Wanted to make sure we got a plug in for you. All right, I'm going to take us out of here. For Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic, for the production crew, very frustrated that the Sabres can't score a power play goal. I'm Kris Baker. We'll see you again very soon. Thanks again, everyone, for hopping into the chat. Have a good night.